Today I'm going to share a deeply personal story with you about how I was born and raised in an international religious cult and suffered over 20 years of all kinds of cult abuse, including child trafficking, and what I do today to protect children, working undercover with law enforcement, with tech giants, with all kinds of experts that are needed in this fight to come together with real solutions to these very solvable problems. So that includes exposing corruption and being a whistleblower to all kinds of things that the public needs to know about and also not fear in order for we the people to do something tangible when it comes to real solutions to protect the innocent. This journey has been anything but easy, and every step of it has informed and fueled what I do today. So join me for this wild ride. I'll give you a little summary of the experiences that had led me to what I'm doing today. Everything I've experienced shapes my mission today to protect children, to expose corruption, and to hold the guilty accountable, whether they're wearing a badge or leading a nonprofit or hiding behind some kind of religious institution. So let's get into it. I was born in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, soy carioca. But my childhood was not the vibrant, happy thing you'd imagine. It was pretty terrible. So thankfully I have a real dark humor about it, which allows me to laugh and smile about a lot of really dark things. But that's a chosen form of healing, and it's also, in my opinion, the biggest middle finger you can give to your abusers. So that's a disclaimer, not an apology. My mother, originally from Dallas, Texas, actually joined an international religious cult when she was in her early 20s, and she decided to stay in and propagate said craziness and have a bunch of kids and raise her children in this cult, which was obviously a very abusive environment in all the ways. She stayed in this cult for over 40 years and climbed the ranks of cult leadership, which means you have to be the most evil, crazy, psychotic to qualify for leadership. So somehow she was put in a position where she oversaw childhood developmental education. So my mother is responsible for the abuse of tens of thousands of children who, like me, were born and raised in this group, had no outside advocacy or support assistance at all. We were never rescued. There are around 25,000 children affected by this terrible organization, and 100% of the abuse was done in the name of Jesus and God and love. So I have a lot to say to Christians, but that's in a different video. I do want to let you know, though, that I am mature and healed enough to understand it wasn't Jesus and God in the Bible abusing 25,000 of us children. It was bad people who were hiding behind the guise of religion and yay God, yay Jesus to do really bad things. So I'm going to tell you why that matters today. But after 8 years in Brazil, we went to the United States for my first time, where we met my mom's relatives in Dallas, Texas. So just realize that we were told the whole world was against us and everyone was wrong and we were the only ones that are right. We can get into cult brainwashing tactics in a different video, but just know that we were heavily scripted and it was very awkward. We were treated like exotic birds. We saw the world like it was very, everyone was bad. It was just a very strange experience. After that, we moved to Mexico for a couple years, and then when I was 10 years old, we moved to Houston, Texas, where we lived for about 4 years of my childhood. Now, here's what's interesting. There's no justification for anything that happens overseas, but I think most of us have a different standard for what we feel like is acceptable or would be allowed in the United States. Now, from the age of 10 to 14 years old, when I was in Houston, Texas, every single week and weekend, I was working on the streets, in restaurants, and shopping malls, and grocery stores, and people's houses, like in all kinds of famous landmarks in the Houston, Texas area. And you know what? It occurred to me a couple years ago, not once did a concerned citizen or law enforcement officer stop and ask me if I was okay, if I had eaten today, like where was I living, why am I not in school? Not one person had the awareness to see the child that was hiding in plain sight right in front of them. Now at 14, I was sent back to Mexico, which I was not happy about. I lived in various cult compounds all over Mexico. I'm speeding up the story because there's so much we could dissect here, but just after I turned 20, I was able to escape this cult. I stayed living in Mexico for about a year longer, working and rebuilding my life, or trying to understand what freedom meant at that point. Realized I had zero family support or safety blankets, so I was just making it on my own and doing what I knew how to do best, which was work really hard and make things happen. About a year later, I moved to Texas and really dove into entrepreneurship. So I was really staying focused on positive things. I owned and operated multiple businesses. I was doing really good things in the world. Fast forward to 2019, one of my companies did a lot of awareness campaigns where we raised awareness and donated to different nonprofits that I thoroughly vetted, because I'm very skeptical of nonprofits and I encourage you to be as well. We'll get into that in a different video, but just know that thorough research is always encouraged when it comes to people that are raising money in the name of solving problems. Just make sure they're actually solving those problems. Okay. So one of those awareness campaigns that we launched was for the missing and murdered Indigenous women. Now, this was a cause I was unaware of until we started working within a First Nations group. And it was my first glimpse into this world of what? This cowardly evil that preys upon women and children, that preys upon the most vulnerable, and where society is just, for some reason, not talking about it. Like, it's just not a thing in people's consciousness, or it's not a priority for people, and it just gets brushed under the rug. So that was my first, like, why is nobody talking about this? We have to do something. So, like I said, we raised awareness and, donated proceeds and all that, but I'm like a real hands-on person, so I was looking how to really get involved and help. And the short version there is that it became pretty apparent to me pretty quickly that if you're not from within that community, it's very difficult for them to accept your help, and for good reason. They've been very, manipulated by all kinds of people that did not have good intentions. So all that to say, I did a lot to look into it. There's a lot of layers of corruption in that whole situation, unfortunately. But I was very compelled that, first of all, these things are happening in the United States. It's one thing to come to terms with the way that I experienced life for my entire childhood and everyone I was raised with. It's very different to accept that this type of evil still exists today in this massive industrial scale way, and that our politicians and our media and the public in general is just completely like clueless and silent about this. So fast forward a couple years, I was really looking into how can I really make a difference? How can I get involved? So I found an organization, a nonprofit, who claimed to be working with law enforcement to arrest and take down child traffickers. So I thought that was pretty cool. I knew that they needed help with their messaging and awareness, so I offered to get involved. They really needed that help, so I did help explode their online presence and their online following and publish a lot of educational resources and, redo their website. A lot of really good educational, prevention education type awareness content that I'm very proud of still to this day. However, although I was being told for a couple years that they were doing all these investigations into these very, high-level organizations and all this high-level corruption, the deeper I got, the more red flags I saw. They raised a lot of money in the name of exposing and eradicating child trafficking, but their actions didn't match their words. So for example, in March 2023, I was asked to assist in an undercover operation in South Texas. What I saw wasn't just incompetence, it felt like intentional corruption. Another op again in May. Basically, we'd build solid cases against these predators, and then warrants would never even get issued. To this day, from everything I've been told, these warrants still have never existed, never even been issued, much less served. But this organization is still claiming all these warrants and fundraising as if all these warrants have been successfully served. So lots of concerning things. Then I noticed something even more concerning, and I was questioning misappropriation of funds and direct involvement with a known harmful cult. And I was questioning these things directly to the executive director and the founder, who I worked very closely with. Now, the responses I got were just, I couldn't play along. They're like, oh, I see how you would think it's a cult, but it's not a cult, and they love Jesus and they're happy and it's totally fine. Like, just all the same patterns, all the same deflection and excuses and gaslighting that cults use to pretend like they're not guilty. So when I questioned it, I was brushed off, and of course, I don't take stupid answers very well to these questions that matter very much to me. So it became impossible to ignore that what I was seeing was not just incompetence, it was intentional corruption. Now, fast forward to May 2024, I was asked to assist with an operation in Tennessee. Now, there was this whole narrative spun that it was Nashville and that Petalwood was moving their child trafficking and what efforts there and laundering money with real estate and pornography, like this whole thing, and it ended up, not at all being that. But what was concerning is that they crossed the line when they asked me to do something very illegal. They asked me to essentially begin the operation from a different state 2 weeks before, which at the very least would compromise the entire operation. So every law enforcement contact that I reached out to about this was like, Kim, no way, who's asking you to do this? Like, at the worst case, it could even put me at significant risk and liability. But the main point here is that, like, why would we do things the wrong way if it won't hold up in a court of law? What's the point of even doing these operations? Oh, unless you don't really care about the outcome. So I relayed these concerns to the founder and the executive director, who again at the time were like, who's filling your head with negativity and you're just the cabal, and like all these weird deflections. So they're like, you should just sit this one out. And I was like, cool, no problem. About a week later, they then asked me to go ahead and assist with it, which I did finally agree to because I had been questioning their misappropriation of funds and association with this cult and other things that were just, things were a little strange at the time. So I had this gut instinct that it's almost like I was being framed, right? It just felt that way. And look, I was born and raised in a cult, like, try to manipulate me, but it's not going to go so well for you. So I decided to go, and I decided to record everything. So I didn't stage anything. I just recorded audio and video of what was going on throughout this operation. And sure enough, it was just, complete chaos, but also things were done so ineffectively that, guess what? It was very ineffective. So I recorded hours and hours of things that were just not the way they're supposed to be done. Sure enough, though, A week after that operation, I was terminated. But that would have been fine. But the way they terminated me, they refused to pay me for months of service. And then they went online and started slandering me in an effort to discredit me and just publishing all these provably false, it's called defamation per se, when what they say is provably false and also so damaging they don't even have to prove damages. So these people were just like going off, like acting exactly like guilty people do, right? Which was interesting. But I had one thing they don't. Verifiable evidence. So around the same time, there was this investigative journalist, Phil Williams, out of Channel 5 News in Nashville, Tennessee, who had been publishing a series of articles about the questionable operations of this local law enforcement agency that we had done this operation with in Millersville, Tennessee. Now, originally I declined the interview. Then TBI, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, reached out to me because they also had begun investigating this local police station. So at that point, things were just escalating and everything was a little crazy. So I met with TBI at their headquarters and I handed them all my evidence. Fast forward in September 2024, TBI raided that local police station. Fast forward to January 2025, Phil Williams published an article saying that 2 of the detectives from that local police station filed a lawsuit against me and are accusing me of falsifying evidence and of trying to interfere with law enforcement activity and basically, ruin their reputation and career. So let's unpack that, right? So let's play as dumb as we possibly can and pretend like you can't verify whether or not videos have been edited or tampered with. And let's also pretend like TBI and the judge who signed the warrant don't know how to verify evidence and they went ahead and raided a police station without verified evidence. I mean, let's go on. But the lawsuit also claimed that TBI and the judge who signed the warrant and Phil Williams with Channel 5 News were all politically motivated to target this Millersville police station. Now here's the kicker. About a month later, after Phil Williams published this article that allegedly I'm being sued, I still have not been served. So I haven't heard anything else about this alleged lawsuit. I just know that there's a lot of crazy things going on. And I know for sure that guilty people get very, very desperate and they really hate the truth. Only if they're guilty. The other interesting thing about the guilty is that they operate out of fear, and fear is a very dense, low vibrational, weak state, unlike truth. So I have the truth on my side, and I have the verifiable evidence to prove it. So I'm sharing this story because I think it's important for people to know how deep corruption runs and how desperate the guilty get to try to deflect the truth because they're so afraid of it, and how important it is to stand for the truth. So I want you guys to know why whistleblower protections exist. It's to shield people from this kind of ridiculous retaliation, but it's also to incentivize people to still do the right thing and speak up and expose corruption, especially people pretending to protect children that are actually the corrupt ones. But it's because the guilty people will try to retaliate. I am very aware there will continue to be attacks against my character, all kinds of provably false allegations that I will continue laughing at, and all kinds of attempts to discredit me and even sabotage my mission of protecting children. Now you could ask yourselves why people would, instead of trying to silence me with the truth, try to discredit a child trafficking survivor who works undercover with law enforcement to protect children. But what's interesting is that so many people are afraid to speak up because they know that guilty people get very, very aggressive with their attempts to defame and discredit the truth. But the truth does not waver or cower. Light doesn't fear darkness because darkness can never overpower light. This journey hasn't been easy. The opposition that I've faced from the inside has been probably the most frustrating part because a lot of these problems when it comes to protecting children in our communities are very solvable. However, if we address these problems from a logical state, we're failing to acknowledge the intentional corruption. Once we, the people, can wrap our heads around how intentional this corruption is, we can then tailor our strategy to be effective. We can then address not only exposing the corrupt, even if they wear a badge or hide behind some sort of political election or religious organization or nonprofit, we have to be willing to acknowledge the real problem so we can implement real solutions. There are countless nonprofits and organizations, especially the ones calling themselves anti-trafficking organizations, raising millions of dollars in the name of combating trafficking that are simply exploiting the problem. In my opinion, that makes them part of the problem. And I'm here to change that. I'm here to not only expose the corrupt, I'm here to stand fearless in the face of this evil because nobody can call it a theory to my face because I'm not backing down and because I was born and raised in a cult. Like, you can try to manipulate me, but it'll be very embarrassing for you. I'm here to make sure real solutions are implemented. I'm here to unite the experts, the ones who are needed in this conversation, to have a comprehensive dialogue about the real problems and the real solutions so we can actually move the needle forward and stop talking about it or raising awareness and actually combat and solve these problems. So today I work with local, state, and federal law enforcement, as well as military branches, government contractors, all kinds of agencies, as well as tech giants and experts in the field of digital safety, to holistically address these problems and also implement training and resources and fill in the gaps where they're so desperately needed in our communities. I also do a lot of public speaking and awareness, speaking to law enforcement and training, as well as mothers and families and communities and children. So the message can be tailored depending on the target audience that I'm addressing, but all of us need to know the truth. Not only that this is a problem, I wish it was a theory, but ignoring it does not make the bad guys go away. And also, there are a lot of people claiming to be combating this problem that are actually part of the problem, so that's another layer that we need to acknowledge. And there are a lot of solutions to this very solvable problem, specifically in the realm of digital safety, which is a big part of my focus. However, a lot of times the public is not aware of the real problems and much less the real solutions. So I'm here to be a voice for the voiceless. I'm here to champion the truth, and I'm here to stand fearless in the face of evil, especially the cowards who prey on children and think it's okay to exploit the vulnerable in the name of yay God. Honestly, it shouldn't have to be me. And for a long time at the beginning, when I was being called to this mission, I was trying to get everyone else who I thought was better positioned and qualified to do this, because it shouldn't have to be me unpacking my trauma in order for strangers on the internet to take this seriously and stop calling it a theory. But I realized pretty quickly that no one's coming to save us. And I realized and I accepted. If not me, then who? Now I'm hoping a lot more people will join this fight, and that my little light out here that's eradicating darkness can help ignite people, that if I can do it with all the love in my heart, you have no excuse not to protect children. None of us have an excuse to allow fear to hold us back from doing the right thing, from protecting children, and from exposing the cowardice, corruption that exists to profit from this type of exploitation. I've realized and accepted how powerful my voice can be in this fight, and I hope that by bringing you along in this journey to not only understand what it's like behind the scenes, but to also have a glimpse into what it's like to be a survivor of said issue and combat all these people that are claiming to help, that are really part of the problem, as well as the real solutions and things that were implemented that are exciting. There's so much good news. Like, in addition to all this craziness that I face, I just want you to know there's so many updates that have lit up my soul and that I will be sharing when they're public, so that you know that there are good guys on the front lines. There are good guys behind badges, behind nonprofits, behind religious organizations who are doing the right thing. It's just generally not the ones that are loud and proud and in your face about it. It's generally the ones that are in the shadows. However, I am honored to work alongside some of the most amazing heroes that sometimes the public won't hear about. In some cases, I'll be able to introduce some of them to you, and I can't wait for you to join me on this journey. Believe me, there's a lot more to come. So follow me on this journey. Hit that subscribe button if you want to be kept updated. I will let you know if there are any updates on this alleged lawsuit thing, but regardless, I'm going to keep doing my thing. It's not going to detract me from the mission. It would actually be a badge of honor to defend the truth in a court of law. So come at me, bro, because I got pages of evidence. If you think words are intimidated for me, you don't know me. This is just the beginning, y'all. And trust me, you're going to want to be here for what's next.